Welcome to the University of Illinois at Chicago.
Yay.
Woohoo! Go Flames. Because we're on fire over here. I'm Teresa Córdova, Director of Great Cities Institute here at UIC, and it's been a great pleasure to work with all of the partners on preparing for today's wonderful and important event. What a great title, huh? Industry and Inclusion. That's what we're about here, right? Promoting the opportunity for increasing industry, but making sure that as we do it, that we do it with inclusion. And so we look forward to a really productive day. I do want to say that I want to give a big, huge shout out to Dan Sweeney, who will not be joining us today, but he is really a force. He's been a force for all these years, really promoting and making sure that the light kept burning for the renaissance of manufacturing. So here's to Dan Sweeney, and with that, let me also introduce Andy Stettner from the Century Foundation. It's indeed been a pleasure working with the Century Foundation for this event. And again, we welcome you to the University of Illinois at Chicago. Thank you.
Thanks, Teresa. I'm Andrew Stettner. I'm a senior fellow at the Century Foundation, and it's Bernard Schwartz Rediscovering Government Initiative. And on behalf of our president, Mark Zuckerman, I want to welcome everyone here to Inclusion in Industry 4.0. This summit is part of a campaign called High Wage America, and we started that campaign, really where it matters, here in the industrial heartland, focusing on revitalizing good-paying manufacturing jobs. And as we developed this campaign out, we are really first here to listen to leaders that are on the front lines here in the Chicago region, building pathways to good-paying manufacturing jobs. And our hope is that we'll spur action locally and also nationally. We've done a series of these summits across the region, starting in Pittsburgh and finishing here in Chicago. And we'll be bringing recommendations from this summit and this series to Washington this September. I'm going to turn it over to Jeff Madrick, the director of our Rediscovering Government Initiative, and thank Bernard Schwartz, who is the donor who has established that initiative and supporting this campaign, and also the Joyce Foundation for supporting this event and the research that you'll hear about today. And I'm very grateful for the local partnership of our local partners in putting together the event, the great Teresa and the great team here at UIC, Manufacturing Renaissance, who's represented by a number of leaders, including David Robinson here today, and the Chicago Federation of Labor and Bob Reiter. So thank you so much for partnering with us and helping build what I hope for everyone here will be an event where you can both listen and also participate in the discussion today. Jeff, why don't you come up?
Remove this. Is there any way I can get rid of this?
No, you can mess it.
I just ruined the conference. Sorry, folks. You can all go home. Aren't you happy? You got that? It's great to see you all. Thank you. As Andy said, this is the third Industrial Heartland conference we're holding, summit we're holding. We're excited about this. We believe America is vulnerable in this area. We've focused on manufacturing here. It's a big deal for us. My own interest in this is has to do with America becoming a low-wage society, which I think people don't fully recognize. Things changed radically in the 1970s, and forgive my disorganization, but before I forget, I want to thank our RGI Century staff who work so hard on this, these conferences. Let me name them: Marielle Aitzoni, Lucy Muirhead, Amanda Novello, and Alex Edwards. Thanks so much. They put in enormous effort. This is by and large Andy Stettner's love child, so thank you again to him. Thanks to our frequent partners, Tom and Joel, who are You all know them. I needn't say too much more about them. The heck with the rest of the thank yous. Let me get on to what I want to say about a low-wage society. We want to restore America to a high-wage society. Many of you know this, but I bet some don't. America always had the highest wages in the world. Even in colonial times, average wages in America were higher than anywhere in the old world. We lost that by and large. Well, let me summarize. By and large, every 15 or 20 years, average wages in America were always substantially higher. That's an important point to remember. Even when we lived through severe recessions in the 1800s, even the Great Depression, wages came back. Since the 1970s, this is not happening. In my view, we caught a disease roughly in the mid-1970s. The disease was called neoliberal economics. The result was a massive neglect of government and belief in government regulations, investment, guidance of the economy, and reaction to changing needs from education to technology. The authors or the carriers of that disease were people like Milton Friedman and others. But democratic economists also got a bit of this disease. They also began to believe that we have to tame the reaches and interventionist tendencies, quote unquote, of the 1960s or even the New Deal government. What's happened since then? The bottom line is labor doesn't get paid in America anymore. This is not a minor issue. I wrote a few facts down, and I'm going to do what I rarely do. I'm going to actually read a bit. As many of you know, the top 1% made up 11% of national income in 1980. The top 1% now earn 20% of national income. National income includes capital and labor income, from 11 to 20% for just 10% of the population. What happened to the bottom 50%? 20% of national income went to the 50% in 1980. It's fallen to just 12%. Pre-tax income of working age adults in the bottom 50% has collapsed since 1980, falling by 20% for adults 20 to 45, 8% for those 45 to 65. The vast majority of Americans have earned little capital, in case you wondered, little capital. That doesn't say stop, does it? Okay, I'm going to try my best. Little capital over the last century. The bottom 90%, no capital. The great increase in the top came from capital incomes. The top 10% of earners derive 40% of their incomes from capital. The top 1 or 0.1%, 70 to 80%. Tax rates. Top earners' tax rates came down. Guess what happened to the rest of us, or at least the bottom 50%? Tax rates have risen, mostly because payroll taxes went up. Taxes are now more regressive in America than they were in any time in the post-World War II era. I'm not even counting the Trump Republican tax cuts. Look, very quickly, maybe I'll skip this, but I think just to put a fine point on it, workers at the 10th percentile made $9.45 an hour in 1980. In 2000, they now make, forgive me for this, I usually can keep these in my head, $9.29. Wages for the 20th percentile are down. Wages all the way up to the 70th percentile are down since 2000. Wages for the high end, way up. 25% of workers earn poverty-level wages. Black male wages, way down, in case you had any doubt. Hispanic men, so wages actually rise faster than blacks or fall less fast, but they remain far below those for blacks. I'll stop there. I think you get the point. I want to make one more point before I leave you. America is no longer a real democracy. This is not only a function of Trump. This has been going on for a long time. Political scientists Page and Gillens did extremely urgent work a couple of years ago about whether the views of middle-class Americans are listened to in Washington. They're not. And that reminds me that I was wrong that America only caught one disease in the 1970s and 1980s. They caught two diseases: money ruling politics. Money ruling politics coincided with the vast increase of wealth, which was mostly financially and capital income oriented since then. Let me tell you let me give you one quick fact. And maybe I won't. Here's what most Americans wanted. Most Americans agreed the country should spend whatever is necessary for really good public schools. 50% favored more government finance worker training. 55% of Americans wanted to expand Social Security. A stunningly low 3% of the wealthy wanted to expand Social Security. That's the point I wanted to get at. The wealthy have a different view of social policy than we do, and they're talking. These guys measured the influence of the wealthy compared to the rest of us, and it shows that democracy is not working. So we've got to cure these two diseases. I know I'm way over time, but I know you're fascinated by what I'm saying. We're devoting a lot of attention to manufacturing here in the industrial heartland, but we're also devoting public investment. We're devoting our resources to public investment issues in education and infrastructure, labor unions, a new idea called fissuring, which is contracting out work used to be done by employees in big corporations to agencies and contractors who pay far less. Data show that this fissuring is a big cause of weakening wages. And of course, we're going to talk about the federal creation of jobs. All that will be in our Washington conference in September. We're asking some of you to participate, but we're bringing what we're learning from the local conferences here to Washington, and we hope to keep going well into 2019 when there's a new Congress. Thank you all. Sorry about this.
So I want to call up Karin Norington-Reaves, who's the Executive Director of the Chicago Cook County Workforce Partnership, which I think is one of the largest workforce area in the country, and really partnering with many of you here to lead this work. Thank you so much for being with us, Karin.
Good morning. So the unique thing about this particular session is not just that we're talking about the marriage of the public and the private sector, because I do think that that's where our solutions lie, but it's also that we're talking about inclusion. And people pay lip service to that notion. They pay lip service to the notion of diversity, but this is really where the rubber meets the road. And so we have representatives here from workforce development organizations, from ministerial alliances, from labor unions, from government, from the private sector. It is critical that we all come together in order to ensure that there truly is inclusion in this new economy. One of the things that we pride ourselves on at the Chicago Cook Workforce Partnership is that our focus is on economic empowerment through employment. And as we know, and as the data is going to bear out, and you'll hear later from many of my colleagues, Dr. Teresa Córdova is going to talk about research. What you're going to hear is that we have areas, despite the great rosy picture that's painted on a federal level about this very low unemployment rate. You know, if you hear it, you think, oh, we're at full employment. Not. We have areas in the city of Chicago and in suburban Chicago where we have 20, 30, 40, 60% unemployment when you slice those numbers by race, by age, by gender. Black and brown men in this region are being pushed out of the economy and therefore cannot contribute to communities and cannot support our communities, and our communities cannot therefore thrive. And so part of what we're here to do today is to look at solutions and understand where there are great opportunities for economic empowerment, for employment, certainly in the area of industry and particularly in manufacturing. One of the things that I think got us here is we as a country, and I just want to piggyback on what Jeff was saying, that we as a country have made a decision that vocational education was no longer important. We have snubbed our noses. Now, I stand here as a lawyer saying this to you, right? Because my parents did not have the opportunity to go to college. It wasn't that they weren't brilliant people, they could not afford it. They came from really big families. And so they wanted something better for me. And so what happens is that every successive generation, we want more for our kids, not realizing that more can lie in doing work that you feel proud of, that fills your spirit, that you're good at. So my son's a tinkerer. He takes everything apart, puts it back together. There's always one screw missing. Always one. Mom, it still works just fine. Dude, it had a screw in it. It was meant to have an extra screw in there somewhere. But I think often, what does this mean? So he's really good with his hands. Will he be a mechanic? Will he want to do mechanical engineering? Will he be an artist? He also loves to paint and to take pictures. And the thing that I think about all the time is, as somebody who has, achieved a certain amount of success and has gotten an advanced degree, will it be okay if he says, I want to go a different route? And the answer is yes, it has to be, because he has to be doing something that he feels passionate about. But in order for us to figure that out, we have to give him exposure. And part of that comes through our educational system and vocational education to allow our young people to explore careers and to see things that they've never seen before. Because as you all have heard, and yes, it's trite, but it's true, if you can't see it, you can't be it. And so part of our responsibility at the partnership and part of our responsibility with Manufacturing Renaissance is to make sure that we're exposing people to the opportunities that truly exist, the opportunities of today and of tomorrow, and putting our money where our mouth is. And so we're making north of $5 million investment right now in training and preparation for these new careers. So I wish you well today. I hope that you walk away with significant lessons learned and with research and information at your fingertips that help us to empower our communities. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is David Robinson. I'm the Organizing and Communications Director for an organization called Manufacturing Renaissance, and I'm honored and privileged to be doing that work. Looks like it's right smack dab in the middle of really what matters to help people. First, though, I want to acknowledge and thank State Treasurer. It's encouraging, I think, that an elected official actually gets it. We don't see that often, so please give State Treasurer another hand. And for all you investors and business owners, it's good to know that my tax dollars are actually being invested wisely in these state corporations, so I'm happy to see that. So I'm going to be brief because we're kind of running a bit out of time. I want to thank the organizers of the event, our friends at Century Foundation, our great friends at Great Cities, all of the people that work with us in labor and education and in the business community. This is a group effort. We're all in this together. You're going to hear a lot today, a number of statistics and some pretty high-minded, thoughtful policy analysis from some very smart people. But I grew up a practical activist, a practivist. So I'm a guy that works on the ground a lot. And so I'm going to bring you down to the ground. Here's what high-wage salary looks like on the ground. So we operate a program called Manufacturing Connects. We've been at it 10 years. And what we do is connect high skills, advanced manufacturing training with our high school kids to the manufacturing sector. In other words, we get them prepared to be exposed to and get jobs in hopefully high-paying manufacturing sector. And we work with the kids on the street in the community. One kid, for example, came through our program named Rakeem. Rakim was involved in street life and wasn't quite sure where he was headed, but we convinced him to get some industry certifications that might give him a shot at opportunity in the manufacturing sector. So Rakim took us up on it. Fast forward, now he is about to be a plant manager, we hope, at a company. He is a union steward, so a nod to our labor friends. And he now has come back to the community as a leader to recruit and tell other young people about this pathway. Rakim is the example. Oh, and here's the high wage part. He has purchased a 2-flat in the community and is now demonstrating what job dignity means to young people that may not know anybody in their community that actually works. We want 10,000 Rakims. We hope you'll help us get them. So part of what this work really is begin to connect all the dots. And that means everyone needs to lend a hand. And we have a number of people that we work with that are fighters. And I'm going to introduce one of the great fighters, a legend, who I have seen stand against apartheid. I've seen her train and prepare young people to be leaders themselves. I've seen her really take advantage of what wasn't there and make a way out of no way with grace, humility, and style. And I am proud to say I also know her pretty well because she happens to be my mother. Let me introduce now Senator Alice Palmer.
Good morning. A long, long time ago, I grew up in Indianapolis, Indiana. From the time I was 10 until I went off to college, I lived on a 1-block street of black homeowner families, kind of like a village. If anyone used a front door key, I didn't know about it. I never heard about it, and everybody worked. Mr. Williams, across the street, had a truck. He was a handyman. His wife was a seamstress. Next door, Mrs. Drain did nails in her downstairs living room. Mrs. Anderson, down from her, had a beauty parlor in the basement. Mrs. Moore had a rooming house for the men who ran on the railroad. And when I went off to school, all the neighbors to college, all the neighbors gathered to see me off. The 22 children on that block all went to college or went to work right after high school. Many of you can probably tell similar stories. Then things fell apart. You heard that, the statistics of that this morning. The fabric of the country unraveled, and part of this country will talk about why. The decline has lasted so long now that the evils that were just under the surface have come to fruition. Racism, poverty, ignorance, hatred, violence, all of these have come to the surface. A United Nations rapporteur who last year just finished a tour of this country said in his report that the United States among the OECD nations is 35th out of 37 nations. What does that tell you about this country? And earlier the speaker spoke about the Milton Friedman neoliberalism. I was in Santiago, Chile. I observed the consequences of Friedman's work. The pall over the city was eerie in a Latin American country where there were no markets. It was horrible. Dr. King asked, where do we go from here? I learned some things growing up on the block. The advantages of having assets, the dignity of work, what that means to a community in terms of its serenity, its collaborativeness, the positive influence of community on social well-being, the importance of the collective good. These are principles that can speak to the question, where do we go from here? We are the assets that we need to launch a follow-up fight for a path to work and well-being. Let us not have this conference be a one-off. I am an organizer and an activist. All that the bio said is all well and good, but bottom line, that's what I do. And so you have the unique possibility with the gathering of this extraordinary group of people representing labor, government, community organizations, all of the parts that are needed to apply our assets to leverage. We now have the making of a collective for best practice. Academics are here, faith-based, think tanks, manufacturers, business, all of us together. We have the skills to craft legislation, such as the recent bill that State Representative Mary Flowers supported successfully in the Illinois House, House Bill 5062. It has not gone through the Senate yet, so here is the chance for you to be that collaborative force to make sure that this bill passes and is enacted, because it calls for funding and preparing more young people for advanced manufacturing jobs. What is it that we don't understand about there's 22,000 jobs on the table? What is it? Who doesn't understand that? Let's get on it, people. We can formulate policies. And policies can only be as good as the practices they engender. And we can put forth practices which are made more viable by inquiry and experience. People's lives are at stake. As Frederick Douglass said, if there is no struggle, there is no progress. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. Make the demand. Now is the time to be a collective force for progress. Give a sense of drama to this effort. Demonstrate the partnership, the collaborative. I am an organizer. This is a campaign. Don't just have it in this wonderful institution. Take it to the neighborhoods. Take it to people who understand what this requires. A campaign must have a field operation. We saw the consequences in 2016 of not having a good field operation. Take it to the streets. Finally, today is the 50th anniversary of D-Day, yes, but also of the assassination of Bobby Kennedy. I said I grew up in Indianapolis. I was in that dark parking lot when Bobby Kennedy's car drove up with just a few people, and he got on the back of a flatbed truck and announced that Dr. King had been assassinated. My son, who just spoke, was a youngster. I have never forgotten that, and I take that as well as the lessons I learned living on the block, and I have put those into everything that I have ever done. Thank you.